Hi everyone, we'll just wait for a few more participants. We have 250 signed up, so we'll just wait for some more to join us.
Hi.
Hey Marina, how are you?
Doing good. How are you?
I am well, thank you. Looks like Joanne's just about to join us.
Yep.
Hey there.
Hi.
How are you?
Well, thank you. I've just we will wait maybe just a couple of minutes. We had about 270 people sign up, which is
Wow.
amazing. We've got a little over 110 on at the moment. So we'll just give it a minute or so before we start. But how are you guys holding up?
Doing just about this the whole time.
Yeah.
Questions, reading, trying to figure it out, and then trying to give people guidance, which, you know.
Sure.
So in terms of the format, Joanne and I talked really briefly this morning. I think what we'll do is I'll run through some of these tax changes and, you know, the deadlines on some of the other reliefs, and then Joanne can get into the loans, you know, those loans that are available. So we don't have to both talk about the same things. Would that work?
Yeah, perfect.
Because it's probably a mix of different things, because there's going to be some individuals and then some businesses, and so I just kind of want to have a rundown of certain things people may or may not have been reading on before we get into those loans, as loans won't apply to the individuals necessarily, and maybe not even to all the businesses. So
sure, I've got you. Yeah, what I intend on doing, I'll probably share my screen just with a bit of an agenda, and then let me do that right now. Share my screen, and then we'll go on to here. See if that works. So hopefully that works. This is the agenda, how I intend on going through it. We'll just tackle some of the questions about the annual rentals initially.
Okay.
Then we'll go on to some the vacation rentals, and then add this bit, which is the stimulus plan, the benefits and taxes. I do anticipate there being a lot of crossover through the three sections. We have a lot of owners who we represent who are also business owners. So there will be some crossover there. And then some of the things we talk about in terms of what we're able to do for our property owners is going to come out of the CARES Act. So it's going to be quite fluid, but I figured if we keep it to these three sections, at least it gives us some order, which we all need in these crazy times. So let me just go back to how many are on. Okay, we've got a few. Okay, so
you're starting with the rentals, and you're starting with the rental stuff first, and then we'll jump in when it's tax time.
Sure.
Okay.
Perfect. And we've got some questions, guys, and the people who are on this webinar, if you start throwing questions in, I can then sort them, and I can punt them to Joanne. But let's start with the introductions. My name's Andy Moore. Some of you may know me. We've got existing clients, potential clients, and also some clients of Joanne and Marina on this webinar. I'm the broker owner at Gulf Coast Property Management. We're a full service solution for rental management, whether that be annual rentals or vacation rentals. We like to consider ourselves as kind of one of the leaders in the industry in the Manatee and Sarasota county areas. So that's a little about me. If I hold on to go over to Marina.
I'm Marina Parkin. I'm a CPA in Sarasota, Florida. Joanne Koontz and I are business partners in the CPA firm, Koontz and Parkin. We handle individual and business tax returns planning and strategy. that's the focus of our practice.
Okay, and Joanne?
And I'm Joanne Koontz. I am both attorney and CPA. So running both the CPA firm with Marina and then running a full service business and real estate law firm at the same time. So we try to incorporate all tax strategy with our real estate planning and business planning side of our business. So we help people buy and sell businesses or real estate and try to manage the tax implications of that at the same time.
Very good. Very good. Okay. And I've known you guys for quite a while now, and you help us on both sides of our business, whether it be legal or the accounting side. We wouldn't want to go anywhere else just because for us, it's a great fit having the legal and the tax and accounting under one roof. So I'm surprised that more companies don't do it because it just seems to make sense. So thank you for what you do for us. So let's dive into the webinar. So we've been having a ton of questions about delinquency. I'm going to go through some of those questions now. Hopefully it's going to answer the people who are live and who will get shared the webinar after if they couldn't make it. If you do have questions that we don't address, please go ahead and fire some questions in because I can't anticipate every question. So if you put it up there, I'll be happy to address from my perspective, and maybe the ladies can chip in also. So the first one, we're really talking about delinquency. Up until probably today or yesterday, it was a guessing game in terms of what the impact of the coronavirus was going to be. We've been playing a waiting game to see what our rental payments on the annual rental side were going to be. Rent was due April 1st. We consider it late on April 5th. Now, looking at our accounting today, up to 10 minutes ago, we had a 70% payment, and we still have another 3 days to what we consider to be late. Looking historically, at this point, we're normally about 80% collection. I imagine with tomorrow being a payday for people who are still being paid, we're going to be receiving a lot more rent tomorrow. So it looks like we're going to be 10 to 15% delinquency for the first month. I was hoping 10%, and each day from really mid-March, my optimism was dwindling. But I'm quite surprised that now we're anticipating kind of a 85% payment and 15% delinquency. So that's encouraging. I do think, however, though, that May is going to be worse and June is going to be worse than May. What are your thoughts on that?
I would echo that. Even as we've looked at some of the relief programs that are coming along, sometimes people are expressing that concern and saying, right now we're okay. I'm more concerned about a few months out. And in terms of the relief packages, some of that is an urgent application process, but it is interesting to see how things will unfold because most people who have lost their jobs have lost them in the last couple of weeks. We're not talking about a couple of months. Whereas if you get out into May and June and July, then we are talking about a few months. So it does seem logical that there will be additional delinquencies. On the flip side, these relief programs that are coming, be they unemployment for folks who were not customarily entitled to unemployment or small business aid, there may be more people who have a disruption of their income and then get back on as the relief becomes available. So you may actually see this be a bit of a bubble and then the curve level out as supplemental income comes in elsewhere.
Sure. Marina, anything to add?
Yeah, I agree. And it seems like even as we get into some of these loans that the businesses are getting in order to continue to pay their people, it seems to me like they're promising that these loans are going to be processed fairly quickly. So this way the employers can get the funds fairly quickly to be able to continue to pay these people. So hopefully that disruption won't be for too far out in time, and people will recover fairly fast.
Gotcha. Good. Okay. So that's where we are in the delinquency. Now we should be looking at what happens to tenants who aren't paying. Now, as many of our clients we've shared with, and you've seen on the news, as a result of the CARES Act, there has been some protection in terms of residency for existing tenants. What we see is for 120 days post the CARES Act coming into law, a halt on evictions, a halt on notices to vacate, a halt on late payments, and also a halt on the credit reporting. Some property management companies will credit report. I understand there's some landlords who would never go to that extent. We actually do report credit on time payments and late payments. So we've had to put a halt to all of that. The question coming to us a lot is what's going to happen after that? And so I'll address that one first. So what I anticipate happening is there's going to be a flood of evictions coming in after the 120 days. How quickly the courts can support that, I'm not too sure, but that's what I anticipate happening. Most probably, we would be entering into notice to vacate agreements with our tenants, rather than adding additional eviction costs to a landlord's ledger, which is already depleted because it hasn't been receiving rents for 120 days. I don't think there'd be many tenants hanging around after they consider they've had a free ride for the last 4 months. I don't know if that's your take, Joanne. And I know that landlord-tenant law isn't your specific expertise, but I just wondered if you had an input in it.
I think that seems reasonable. I would suspect that once everything, if this continues to get worse, then I would expect that the legislation could potentially be revised and change the rules, or you may find that there will be an incentive to have alternative dispute resolutions utilized rather than plugging up the courts with what they deem to be rather minor eviction processes, given everything else that's going on. So I anticipate there will be some relief valve one way or the other, either with a carrot or a stick, either penalizing you for using the courts or incentivizing you to avoid the courts.
Sure. Yeah, so again, that is in the future. We're not going to know, so it's a maybe. The follow-up question to that, to what many landlords and quite honestly a lot of tenants, we've been inundated with requests for rent abatement, requests for forbearance, requests for modification. I don't know if there are any, and from our research within the industry and our position and from the national guidelines we've been following, I don't think there's any rules that's going to prevent anyone from entering into a modification. Our position, unless strongly advised by, or strongly requested by the landlords that we represent, we don't know when this is going to last until. We don't know what programs are going to be on offer. So rather than entering into any formal modification agreements, the way we're going to approach this is encourage tenants to pay as much as they can. Mm-hmm. And we will wait and see until after the 120 days, assuming it ends at 120 days, wait and see, and then take a look at the situation then. I don't want my rental managers or who represent the landlords actually going in, making modifications when we don't really know the full impact of where we're at. In addition, from a brokerage standpoint, I have real concerns from a fair housing standpoint, in that if we are offering modification to some and not others, even though it's based on instructions from our clients, we're opening ourselves up to all sorts of discrimination and fair housing complications if just by happenstance a protected class isn't given a modification and a non-protected class is. So that's our take. You think that's fair?
I think that's very wise. There's definitely, at the end of the day, that will all fall to the brokerage, despite the direction of the individual landlords. So I think and it protects the other landlords as well. So you may have one landlord who's really aggressive, others who aren't, and ultimately, you don't want anybody to end up in a situation where there's some crazy argument. The problem with any kind of catastrophe like this is then there's somebody trying to find a way to earn a living in a way that's not up to par, and so there's going to be somebody chasing people for frivolous lawsuits like that.
Yeah, absolutely. I guess really a follow-up to that, everyone has an opinion on it, and tenants are expecting rent relief, and they expect that they should get it. We're being hammered through on social media because of our position. We do have very, very generous landlords who have proactively reached out to us and said, we care about our tenants, we care about their current situation, and we want to give a month's grace to them. And again, our advice is, it's okay giving a month's grace now, but what happens the following month and the following month and the following month? And you could open a real can of worms, and that charity can very quickly turn into someone taking advantage of you. So for any landlords out there who aren't customers of ours, I do take a wait and see approach. If they don't pay you, they don't pay you. It's not as though you have any immediate redress for collecting the money anyway. So I would sit tight and see what comes down the pike. So really, that's going to be our approach. We've had questions like, can we have a security deposit? Can the security deposit be used for rent? Our approach to that is, a security deposit can, if both parties agree. But again, that's modifying a lease agreement. That's modifying, and it also, when it comes to the end of the lease, what do you have to hold the person accountable to? So that's something we would never recommend. So you can, if both parties agree to it, but it's not advisable in it, at least at the moment. You have typically 1 month's rent. It's some kind of protection. Utility costs. Who is responsible for utility costs? If your tenant stops paying, assuming that you're not in a condo association and the water isn't paid, and assuming that, and it's that the utilities are actually in the tenant's name, they will remain in the tenant's name, and it'll be their debt. I think I'm right in saying that, Joanne. I don't know if you can chip in there.
Yep.
Okay. Collections. Once someone has left, once we're done with 120 days, and we are able to start collecting, as a company, we've never really pursued collections that aggressively, essentially because the problems we've had with tenants probably down to adequate screening and the programs we have in place. But when we have run into tenants vacating early or the need for collections, we've re-rented the property typically within a month. We've applied the previous security deposit to the ledger that get transferred to the owner. So typically, you're only talking a couple of $100, maybe $1,000 in damages to the owner, because you can't double dip. You can't hold the previous tenant accountable to rent and then also re-rent the property. So the damages are, that's on residential, not commercial, but the damages are limited to maybe $1,000 at the most. And there hasn't really been the necessity to go after that. Getting blood out of the turnip is hard, and you may win a case, but actually getting the money is another thing. I'm not too sure whether or not that's going to open up opportunities now, because now we're not talking about 1 month. If a tenant really doesn't pay for 4 months, this might be a 4-month thing or a 5-month thing by the time you get someone out of the property. As a company, we may have to change our approach to collections, because it may now be significant that the owner is out of pocket. We're not just talking about 1 month. Do you have any advice for landlords about collections? Is it something that you run into? Is it something that you ever do in terms of advising clients on how to collect on larger sums?
We really don't get, involved in that much, more in the negotiation of commercial leases or in the drafting of residential leases. And then we're looking in the standard residential lease, you're looking at traditional first, last, and security. So the actual process of pursuing the collection is not something that we get involved in.
Okay. Yeah, so for landlords out there who are clients of ours, evicting is one thing, and actually getting possession, but actually getting the damages is a different ball of wax. And again, you can win your judgment, but it's then very difficult to collect. And if you are spending hundreds of dollars or sometimes thousands of dollars collecting on a smaller debt, you then have to ask the question, is that a wise business decision? It may be emotionally satisfying sometimes, but is that a wise business decision to pursue that? But we'll see, because if it's 4 months or 5 months worth of delinquent rent, it can run then into the thousands, which makes it a different conversation. So the CARES Act, backtracking slightly, the CARES Act only applies, in our interpretation, only applies to government-backed loans. So we've had lots of questions about, what if it's a private mortgage? What if I own the property free and clear? How does that then apply to my situation? I might hand that over to you, Joanne, because I've got an interpretation of it, but you're the attorney, so.
I mean, if you want to go, I'll jump on top of you if you like. I don't want to interrupt I don't want to go in a different direction.
Sure. So yeah, that is our interpretation, that it's only government-backed loan, which are the majority of mortgages within the country. I just think you are going to have even if it is a individually owned property without a mortgage, so free and clear, I think you're going to have a really hard time convincing a judge to evict in this climate. If the courts are open, if the judge is willing to hear it, I think a judge may follow the guidelines that the CARES Act has created, even though it's not covered within the CARES Act. Mm-hmm. What do you think to that?
I think that's reasonable. The only way that I would see any real incentive for court to get involved and go on top of that or be different than that is if you could show some intentional damage or something, dangerous occurring at the property. That's really the only thing there. I could see that getting, a little bit, giving the court an incentive to not follow that. Yeah.
Sure. Okay. And this is something, again, all investors should perhaps look at. It sounds great sometimes saying I've got a property free and clear. We've had webinars on it, and we've got videos and things on our website. It sounds great having a property free and clear, but for all sorts of reasons, having some debt on your property it's not a bad thing. Whether it protects you from title fraud, or the interest is deductible. There are benefits to having a loan on your property. I'm not advising that everyone rushes out now and gets mortgages, but there is something to be said for carrying debt on investment properties, right?
Definitely. Even if it's just simply from the leveraging of the money so that you can build the portfolio, which will not only hopefully net you a greater reward, but also minimize and diversify risk. So if you have one rental property and something happens, something apart from something global like this, but if there was an issue, if there was a fire, if there was some issue with that particular property, if there's 2 or 3 or 5 or 20 or 150 others, you can weather the storm a little bit more easily. So by using the debt, you're able to acquire more properties, which is allowing you to spread the risk. It's kind of no different than diversifying in a stock portfolio, but using it with real estate instead.
Okay, great. Marina?
Yes, and just like you mentioned, from tax deductibility standpoint, of course, interest is deductible. I always tell my clients, don't let the interest deductibility be the driving force behind having a loan. And most of our real estate clients on the tax side, I see the reason behind the loan is not the interest deductibility more so, but the leveraging. And typically where we see more of a problem is when they're over leveraged. So when every single property they own, including all their homes and vacation homes, have a mortgage, and then they run into problem. But if you've got a property going where the income covers the expenses, including the mortgage payment, then you've got that property cooking, and then you can move on to the other ones, utilizing your cash a little bit better. The other thing I do want to mention is having the loan allows you to build up some cash reserves. So when you get into a situation as we are in right now, if these landlords have some cash reserves, it allows them to, still carry the property and the expenses, even if they have tenants who are not able to pay. So definitely having the cash reserve while you still have some leverage is okay. It is a balancing act. Sure.
And I touched on it briefly, and I was jesting a little bit, but what are is it out of the bounds of reality right now that people are still writing loans, right? It hasn't if you do own a property free and clear, there's no reason why you can't get some kind of home equity line or a mortgage or something on that property right now, and then as a result that might give you some added protection if this extends past the 120 days.
Yeah, and you definitely, with the interest rate environment right now, there was a lot of confusion when the Fed funds rate was reduced down to nearly zero. People thought the mortgage rates would be zero. So there was a little blip during that time where mortgage rates spiked a little bit, but we're seeing extremely, extremely low interest rates, and that will continue. So I don't see any slowdown, at least in the immediate future. Loans are still not only available, banks are writing the loans. There's no shrinkage in credit extension right now, but there's also no shortage of ability, despite lockdowns or stay in place, shelter in place orders. Banking is, in the wake of the Great Depression, you will not find the government closing the bank. So the Housing and Urban Development National government agency has suggested that housing is an essential need for folks. So the ability to get a loan, to get a notary, to get a surveyor, to get an inspector, all of those things that are ancillary to housing have been deemed essential and will continue to be in place. So there's no reason to say, well, now I won't be able to do it because we have to stay home. Banks are ensuring that those transactions are being done safely. So for example, when we're closing whether they're purchases or refinances, when we're closing loans in our office, if our buyers or borrowers are not local, I've got one right now where the guy's in Dallas. I can't sign him because he's not here, but we're just telling people, make sure you get with your bank. They are typically taking notary appointments by appointment only and only allowing the necessary parties in. So you can't bring, you know, your kids, you can't bring the babysitter, you can't bring your elderly mom. You have to go to the appointment, only the people who need to notarize the documents. But those things are still readily available. You need to take the steps to secure your time. It's not just show up and have your papers with you like in days gone by, but it's certainly still available. There's also mobile notaries where folks will come to you. I've heard plenty of stories of folks saying, I don't feel comfortable letting someone in my home. So they're meeting in the garage or notarizing documents in a car. Things, you know, it's Wild West now. There's also remote online notarization, which is, you'll see the acronym if you're looking online, called RON. That remote online notarization is essentially a digital video conferencing ability to notarize documents. I can look, Andy, at your passport and your signature and can watch you sign the documents and then confirm I can notarize, you know, through a digital landscape, and that is acceptable. Lenders are being encouraged by the American Land Title Association to accept loan documents with the RON notarization. It's not been a problem since that just became law in Florida January 1st. As is customary with government rules, the law said you can remote online notarize starting January 1st. The ability to become a remote online notary, you have to take a course and be certified, and there were no courses that were certified until about a month ago. So in practice, you know, you couldn't actually notarize remotely in January, but the law said you could. So it's the same, you know, as always with government rules, it takes a minute for the implementation to catch up. It's not been any trouble getting seller documents executed that way, but the lenders are very specific. So long answer, but short story is loans are available and you can still obtain the services that you need to complete those.
Got it. Yeah, that makes sense. Okay. That is something for people to consider. Couple more questions are coming in. Essential, but you kind of touched on essential businesses. We've confirmed property management, real estate. We are an essential business. My staff will still be working where possible, exercising caution, social distancing, etc., etc. We are working, we are going. What we've done as a company is we've paused or suspended rather periodic inspections, but we are performing the services of showing properties, exercising social distancing, and we're also going into properties after tenants have left and prior to performing more move-in inspections. So we are still performing those duties, but we are just, one of the things we suspended is periodic, when people are in the houses. We're still attending to maintenance, albeit on a priority basis. But the problem with this is this CARES Act doesn't supersede the requirements of the Landlord-Tenant Act. So if we're not performing services when there's a plumbing issue, if you like, on one hand, tenants don't have to pay because they've got this protection, but they can also then claim some damages because we're not performing the services that they are contractually obligated to. So it's there are rough times really to be a landlord or rental manager. You know, but yeah, we have to do what we have to do. So let's go. I've got some questions here. If we own and rent property as a self-employed LLC, can we obtain the PPP loan and use our capital draw as employment? I'll tell you what, can I put that towards the end? Because I think that's going to apply to a few people. I've got, does the CARE Act apply to commercial leases? again, that's you, Joanne, I think. I don't think it does, personally.
No.
I think it's residential, but...
All of this is about protecting people and their individual space. So I haven't seen anything that indicates that. Of course, this is a fluid situation. One thing I will say is there's a lot of rumbling that there will be a fourth stimulus package coming next week. And there's nothing to say that something like that won't be addressed then. The concern with commercial leases is, I'm sure everyone is aware, Cheesecake Factory came out and said, we are not paying on any of our 300 locations anywhere in the world. Just flatly, like that, we're just not doing that. So don't be surprised when you don't get your check. And you have to think that the nature of the location of Cheesecake Factory leases, for example, they're always in anchor shopping centers, in malls. That's not, there are a few standalones, but that's not, something that's typically unanchored. And there is concern, even in locally, UTC, why would Seasons 52 or Capitol Grill continue to pay if they know that Cheesecake Factory isn't going to pay? So while I would say, no, the CARES Act doesn't apply, if I got my crystal ball out, which clearly I have, or I, wouldn't work here. So don't rely on that. It seems to me that it may not be next week, but at some point they're going to have to address that, because this could snowball and start to cause a bigger problem with the business side of the economy. If people are just, I hate to say voluntarily not paying, of course, all, restaurants have all suffered. But if that becomes a free-for-all, that can have a big trickle-down effect. So I could see there being some mandate, while the government typically will stroke and coddle poor, John and Susie homeowner and residential folks who aren't sophisticated in the government's eyes to necessarily protect themselves. The commercial leases have always been exempt from any of those tenant protections. I could see something like that coming just based on volume if this starts to spiral. On the flip side, you've got a lot of public PR being sought by some, like Publix recently came out and said, we know you're not going to pay, so we may as well turn this into a good, feel-good story. So Publix said, we're abating rent on any of our shopping centers. There may be a balance where there's some good Samaritans who step forth and say, for the publicity, I will forego the rent. And there may be, the flip side where if you have more Cheesecake Factory stories, that the government has to do something to stop the bleeding.
Gotcha.
Well, and I also think that as companies are now, these businesses applying for these PPP loans, a big use of these loans is the rent and the mortgage payment. Mm-hmm. So if they're obtaining these loans and the use of the loan is to pay the rent, there should not be a reason why they wouldn't be paying rent if they did get this money. And in fact, the forgiveness of these loans, which is what everybody's chasing the PPP loans are for, is based on you continuing to sustain payments. Yes, most of the payments have to be to salaries and wages for your employees, but rent and or mortgage payment and your utilities are part of that condition as well. So you still have to sustain those payments if you want forgiveness of the loan. And then there's of course other loans available, which we'll talk about later, but all of those loans can be used to continue to pay rent, because the trickle down is of course to the landlords as well.
Right, gotcha. Very good. Let me go through these if there's any more. We've got Elizabeth. She's asking, we're a new client with your company. Are the chances of renting properties slim? People need places to live. People will still continue with their life to an extent. We have had this week, we've had 7 new property management agreements, and we've had over 15 applications on properties. So our leasing agents are still out there showing properties. There is going to be, I'm sure, with a real shutdown, it is going to affect productivity. But to say that there's not going to be any leasing activity, I wouldn't say that. I would say we will do it, maybe slightly affected, but it's not going to come to a complete halt.
This came out of nowhere. So there are people who were in transition. We have buyers on the real estate side of our law firm who we did the closing when they sold their property a month ago and are still looking for a suitable replacement property. Those kind of people may say, you know what, I'm going to pull out of the real estate purchase and I may go rent something, and they were otherwise not considering the rental market. You know, in terms of annual rentals, seasonal rentals, you're going to see disruption, but for the annuals, I think you're going to see lots of people for lots of different reasons become renters who previously weren't, let alone the renters who are moving just because, you know, somebody who moved last April, their lease is about to be up, and if the landlord and they don't agree to renew, you know, they're going to need to go somewhere. So
yeah, absolutely. I think Joe Richardson had answered, and he said, does this apply to all new leases? And now I think if you're asking, it covers any residential leases that are in place from now until the end of the 120 days. If I'm reading your question correctly, Joe, that anyone who's under a lease at the moment, whether that was started prior to March 26th or after, is going to be affected by this. Now, so yes, we do have people still looking for that. One of the things that we have here, and it's really interesting, I'll put it out to our clients. And if there's anyone here working with another property management company, they may well have a similar product, or if you're not and you're looking at some assurance, we actually have two plans within our management. One of which is what we call a guarantee plan, and we've aligned with an insurance company, and it's Allstate Insurance, and they are. When you come on board with us, we pay a premium to Allstate for rental protection for the landlord that pays eviction costs and 3 months of non-payment of rent. Now, it does only kick in after eviction. We're still right that we've spoken to them today. They're still writing policies, even in the backdrop of this, because what they base it on is rental management's history and their screening criteria. And because we haven't changed our screening criteria, and we're quite strict in how we go about screening our tenants, they're still underwriting our guarantee plan. And we have, as I said, we have this week, we've had owners signing up for our property management plan. It's pennies really more than what our essential plan is. But some landlords are still choosing the lighter version over our guarantee plan. And across the year, it probably on average, it probably make $600 or $700 difference to their expenses. And for the life of me, I can't understand why they would, because they are guaranteeing rent for 3 months. That's essentially what they're buying with us, is they're guaranteeing rent protection for 3 months based on our screening criteria. So if you are another company or people out there who then speak to your property management company about those type of plans, because they are available to rental management companies. Okay, quickly.
And deductible.
And it's deductible.
And deductible.
Yeah, absolutely. Quickly, I mean, we probably haven't covered all of the annual rentals, and there may be more to discuss in weeks to come, which we could probably come onto another webinar, and you'll have an idea of the questions that are coming your way there. So I'm not going to just, so you'd have more preparation. So quickly going on to vacation rentals, that's a big part of what we do here, is vacation rentals, they've been decimated. The vacation rental industry, and I think everyone may have seen VRBO, HomeAway, Airbnb, the bad press they've got over the last few weeks. I tell you, as a company, it's probably wiped off 20% of our forecasted revenue already, and it's scary, and that's on us. And I understand what property owners who bought for vacation rental investment must be thinking right now. We got ahead of it a little bit, and we authorized refunds. We didn't wait for. We looked at HomeAways and Airbnbs, what their policies were and what they were saying at the time, but we got ahead of it and said, we're going to give refunds anyway. If you can't travel because of flights being cancelled, if you can't travel because of this, and you've got to stay at home and stay in shelter, we're going to lose that fight anyway. If they at some point just either take us to court or just reverse the credit card charges, we're going to lose. And for the life of me, I couldn't see why HomeAway and VRBO, Airbnb were fighting it. But now I'm glad to see they have reversed kind of their decision, and they are taking a more mellow approach. It's not really a question. Do you represent, or have you been working with any companies or landlords who have vacation rentals? Do you see any other fallout from people who not giving refunds in this situation?
Everybody that I've worked with has been proactive. All of the serial seasonal renters, landlords that we have, the folks that have a portfolio of it, were in some sort of hospitality industry before coming here anyway. And I think people saw the same thing that you saw. Like, there's just, not only is it an uphill battle and you probably won't win, but the goodwill. A lot of seasonal renters, particularly in our area, they have the same folks coming every year. Once you have that couple from Canada or from the UK, and they always take those same weeks. With some of these folks, they've even established a relationship with them. Mm-hmm. So for the clients that we've worked with, it's been a no-brainer. Yes, it is going to, reduce their ROI and, reduce their profitability, but they were more concerned about kind of the overall karma balance and ability to re-rent in the future, especially with people being kind of keyboard warriors. You don't want those reviews. A lot of these small folks who either self-manage or have small companies that they do this through, investment companies that they do it through, they don't want 25 irate people from Toronto beating them to death on Google reviews.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, Yelp, Google will kill us. HomeAway reviews will kill us.
Yeah.
And it's taking a long-term, mindset rather than the initial. And we do, I feel personally for a lot of the companies, like the Carolinas or, the Shore in Jersey, that are summer-based. That's when their season is, if you like. At least we got through the majority of season. That's something I'm really thankful for. Mm-hmm. If this had happened in November, and I'm touch wood that we're not dealing with this next November, but it is there is some grace there for us that we actually got through most of the season.
And there seems to be too an argument that people will have some pent up spending that they do as soon as this is over. They will want to come back here. And if they did miss their spring break, or they did miss Easter, or they did miss class reunion or girls trip or 40th birthday or whatever the milestone was that was causing them to travel, much of that will get rebooked. So, it may end up shaking out in the wash that it may not be so much in lost revenue by the end of the year. It may catch up. You may actually see demand in the back half of the year that you wouldn't typically have. You may see that before season starts in November. You might see people fighting to get here in August, where you normally would be like, who's gonna come in August? And it's a lottery. You may find that because it is, I mean, we as people who live here year round know that, you know, it's hot and the season is more in the winter time, but the beach is always here. It's always sunny. It's always beautiful. Like you said, in the Jersey Shore, the water's freezing in the middle of the season. Imagine trying to send somebody there in October or September. It's impractical. So you may get some of that shoulder travel as well to help offset it.
Gotcha. One of the questions that come up is for us specifically, did some renters extend their vacation rental as a result of the virus? And absolutely they did. We didn't see anywhere near the volume to offset the cancellations that we had, but some owners did make out. Some owners did see guests stay and are still staying. I'll touch on the state action in a second, and then just going quickly to another question. If one of our clients is asking, if we have 2 properties on one Gulf Coast account and only one property has a mortgage, can you use the mortgage on the one property to subsidize the delinquency on the non-mortgaged property? I don't think we pay, I'm pretty sure we wouldn't pay your mortgage, so that would be a question for you, for the actual owner, how they use the okay. Bill, I will get with you on that question. That's probably quite a unique question, and I'll address that with you separately. We've got okay, and Kim, I've got that. Okay, so ask the state action, and I don't know if it's not a legal question, I don't think, Joanne, but it's probably an opinion. Last Friday, Governor DeSantis signed into state law a suspension of vacation rentals. Now there were some, it was of 30 days or less, of that aren't annual rentals. It's essentially it hit vacation rentals. It was specific to vacation rentals. In actual fact, he went on to say this does not apply to hotels, motels, inns, bed and breakfasts. And yeah, not only from a brokerage standpoint, that significantly affects us. It also affects our property owners and our, who employ us to manage their investments. But just from a common sense moral standpoint, I can't see how a vacation rental is any more riskier than a hotel, motel, or BBA. In actual fact, you could go one step further and say it's easier to isolate yourself within a vacation rental than it is in a hotel. And I'm aghast at it, and I don't know what, and maybe it's damages, but maybe it's damages that come under the PPP. But could you see any action? Could you see a class action coming out of something like that from an industry standpoint?
Absolutely. And the interesting point is, I know of a case where one of the local hotels here, a large luxury chain, approached our city government and said, this is insane. Our hotel has 60 rooms full of people from New York. We should not be open, but yet an Airbnb or, a seasonal rental where you are in a little cottage in Toll's Court or down on the beach, the people are completely by themselves. It's really no different than the setup of any other single family home. Why would you do that? I mean, to your point, it seems to me to be worse to be in a group setting in the hotel rather than spread out. The only thing that I can think is that, with especially self-managed properties, there may not be consistent application of sanitization processes and things. That's the only real public policy reason I could think of, is they don't know what's happening in between guests. So from when you flip over a room, there are requirements in a hotel in order to be licensed, and those things are examined. That's not really as stringent in the self-rental market, particularly. You know, Airbnb is not coming in to make sure the place is clean. They're just relying on negative reviews. So that's the only kind of public policy health standpoint that I could see having any validity.
Yeah.
That or lobby of the hotel industry.
Wow.
More practically, if we're being honest.
Yeah. Well, that goes to one point. One of Kim, one of our other clients, Go Vacation Rental. She's asking, are we taking any further precautions, additional precautions when it comes to servicing our vacation rentals and cleaning and turning over our vacation rentals? And we are. I mean, the cleaners that we use have been given COVID-19 flyers and instructions. Do you see? But that's only as good as they apply. I mean, you can lead a horse to water, can make a drink. You can. There's no real way for us to verify that's been done. Although, you know, these are our instructions. These are the chemicals we want you to use, etc., etc. What kind of, it is difficult for you, I understand. I don't really want to put you on the spot, but from a liability, we've got owners who are concerned about liability. And that could apply to annual rentals and vacation rentals too, in this situation. Is there an easy answer?
Well, let me put my big fancy lawyer hat on and tell you that I always 100% of the time recommend that if you have rental property, you do not own it in your individual name. And a lot of times people think I'm crazy, or they say, I have insurance, I'm not worried, I have insurance. Insurance is fantastic. You should have it. It's like long underwear when you go skiing though. You need that LLC or and you know, corporate entity, depending on where you're from. Canadians, no LLCs, please, but pretty much everybody else, you need that LLC to insulate you and isolate you from liability. So yes, there's a concern that you may have liability. That concern is always there. That concern is there if anything happens in the property, if anyone is injured, if, you know, somebody falls in the pool, whatever happens. The flip side is also true though. If you're driving a car, you could have personal liability, and now they can take this rental property from you to collect. As you said earlier, judgments are difficult to get paid on unless there's unencumbered, you know, real estate, and they can smack a lien on that and take it real fast. Your friends at Morgan & Morgan, for the other people, you know, they're very good at property searches, so they can see very quickly what someone's amassed, you know, wealth is with an easy search of things that you don't even realize are in the public record. So any coronavirus or not, it's never my recommendation to own a rental property in your individual name. This heightens the exposure to liability. But liability should already be keeping people to keep these things out of their name. Now, if you do have liability and it's in an LLC and you've operated that LLC properly, the only thing that's up for grabs is the property, the assets of the company. So it's nice to have insurance. You hope it will protect you if there is some negligence on your part as the owner, but it's certainly not all I would rely upon. There's entire buildings and departments in the insurance company paid to deny claims.
Right, gotcha. I mean, if we worried about liability, then that was our determining factor. Most of us wouldn't get out of bed. There is something. Correct. You are exposing yourself every single day of the week, every minute of the day. But as what we try to do as a company is mitigate that risk. And the ways you can mitigate that risk, I believe, are having documented processes, having when you bring a staff member on, they are trained in a certain way, having the guests sign waivers and liability waivers. Is in its entirety, is any of that going to stop an attorney coming after you or chancing their arm? Probably not. That's not going to happen. They're all out there. But I do think that at some point, an attorney is going to look at the low-hanging fruit. And is he gonna go after a company who represents landlords who has A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H checklists with all their ducks in a row as much as they can, or the owner who hasn't got anything, or the mom and pop property management who has no policy and procedure, who doesn't have software, who doesn't have, and it's more likely, because that's the lower hanging fruit, because very often these people will come to contingency and they're only going to get paid if they're successful. And the chances of being successful are more akin to the mom and pop over the company who has all the things in all their ducks in a row. Is that going to stop someone? Absolutely not. But as a business owner, that's the mentality I have to take, because no one's going to stop litigation.
No, but when you have the proper entities in place, and like you said, when you've got your documentation in place, it's akin to a kid in school. If you have good handwriting, you're more likely to get a better grade on the project. You know, you get that benefit of the doubt, whether it comes from the court or, you know, somebody evaluating the risk on the, you know, on the other side. So it always behooves you to have all the corporate documentation and all of your property documentation in order. A lot of times, especially when people hand something over to someone like you, Andy, they say, oh, I've got a property manager. Well, they're not a servant. You still need bookkeeping and accounting. You still need, you know, to interface with the other vendors. You don't replace the property owner. You simply assist them. And sometimes people want to check out and they say, well, I think they've done it. Well, have they? You need to make sure.
Sure.
That it's even something you're being paid to do.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
I also think that this particular situation, and hopefully everybody's going to come out of it with the least damage possible, but this will be a good checkpoint of, do I have all my ducks in a row? Do I have my legal structure done properly? Do I have an LLC? Do I have an operating agreement? Who owns my LLC? Who owns my property? You can have an LLC, but your property is not titled to your LLC. So that is completely counterproductive here. Do you have 3 to 6 months of expenses saved in a checking account in the event of this emergency? Do you have a policy in place to handle your employees or you know, so on? So this is going to be a great time to step back and say, oh my God, I've got to clean up everything from my corporate documents all the way to all my procedures and policies that are just internal.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, moving on, I've got a couple of specific questions that I'll probably have a quick go answering, but then I'll refer a lot of these to you guys. Is having your home in a family trust, or having it as an LLC, does that insulate you from being sued?
The LLC, nothing stops somebody from throwing the grenade at you. So anybody can file any kind of lawsuit. The LLC does offer liability protection, meaning if there is liability, the only assets that are available to collect on that judgment would be assets of the LLC, which is customarily, in this case, the property, maybe a small bank account. The trust actually has it's not a separate entity in most cases. Family trusts have a tendency to be what are called grantor trusts. They do not have a separate tax ID number. They are not a separate legal entity. That actually can be a double-edged sword, because you may find that you've got the trust set up to, what it protects you from is estate tax, customarily. Now, if you title a rental property into the trust and there's a liability, now all your trust assets are exposed. So typically, that's not something we would see folks do. We would see the title to the property owned by an LLC, and then the ownership of the LLC be the family trust. So that way you get that estate planning benefit and the protection from estate tax, but you don't want your trust getting tied up in litigation over something that happened at a rental property.
Gotcha. Okay. So after this webinar, all your details will be resent out again, and I'll be encouraging all my clients to reach out to you guys to discuss their individual circumstances. Okay. One of the homes we manage is a season rental per portal. Okay, so we have owners who we're managing properties at the moment that there are bookings in place, and they're concerned about the no-shows and cancellations, and can they come and use it? So from our policy to these guests, to these owners, is if there's a guest in place, they've paid, we are, at the moment, it's the guest that is wielding the power, if you like. They've paid, we're assuming they're coming. If they cancel, then that property becomes opened up. We should know. We are reaching out to incoming guests all of the time. If they're going to cancel, they will be. We'll know that. We'll know pretty shortly if they're cancelling, and then off that property would be open to the owner. It does bring in a different legal question, though, in that COVID-19 state laws. We hear that the borders closed, people aren't coming. So someone coming from New York, they own a property in Florida as a vacation rental, a seasonal rental, but they want to come from New York to use their property. Are they able to do so?
Right now, yes, you can come back to your property. You are required to self-quarantine for 2 weeks. My understanding is they are taking information at the border, and they do checks to confirm that you are where you said you would be and that you have quarantined. It is both a criminal and a financial fine if you are not where you said you were going to be. So it is something at this point that's very serious and being taken very seriously. There are some constitutional issues with stopping people at state borders. We're doing it at the Florida border and also on I-10 because there's a lot of people from New Orleans trying to come in. So there's a bit of buzz in the legal world about the constitutionality of stopping interstate travel. There's certainly an emergency here. There's, no shock that we are having such an exponential increase between cruise ships and spring break and the elderly population here. We are being hit with cases, exponentially higher and faster than other places, and do think you can expect to see that to continue. Gotcha. As that happens, then this argument for imposing limits on our otherwise freedom to move amongst the states for the greater good becomes a bigger argument, but that's a constitutional argument and definitely not, was not my area of interest in law school, and it's not something I'm picking up 15 years in.
Okay, very good. Just quickly, our forecast, we are taking bookings. We are taking bookings of 30 days or more if people want to come in now. We've got a temporary COVID-19 conditions on those bookings where before the end of June, if someone wants to cancel, they can. We'll give a free refund. After that date, we're going to be pushing it out to be strengthening that cancellation clause that we have in our agreements. I'm optimistic. I'm optimistic we'll get over this and it'll be back to business as usual. And hopefully we'll have a strong Q3, Q4, which we don't normally get. So some of the pain will be eliminated or mitigated. I think what I'm going to do in terms of the webinars, I think it's been a success. I'm not too sure. We had 100 on and we had over 200 registered, but I don't know if they all got on. I think I'm going to take another look at that, and I'll do a separate one for annual rentals, a separate one for vacation rentals. But for now, I'd like really hand it over to you and talk about the CARES Act, how it affects, firstly, what relief do homeowners get that are operating their properties as investment rentals. So yes, they're going to get mortgage relief from most likely get mortgage relief from their mortgage provider. But then also, where do they stand with PPP? Where do they stand with relief? And then we can go on to benefits and taxes.
I'd like to, maybe before we get even into the Federal CARES Act, I'd like to just bring a couple of things from Florida that may be relevant to the landlords and the homeowners. First of all, for those that do own their properties through LLCs, and the annual report filing in Florida is normally due April 1st. That deadline has been extended to June 30th. So you still have, if you haven't filed your annual report, you have until June 30th to do so. The other two extensions I wanted to mention for this group is the tangible personal property filing deadline for those landlords that are filing TPP reports in Sarasota County and Manatee County. Those are also always due on April 1st. Sarasota County has 45-day extension, so your tangible personal property is now due May 15th. Manatee County has a 30-day extension, so now that's due May 1st without having to file any of the extensions. So that's on the state side. I wanted to kind of jump into some of the relevant tax things that I think landlords would benefit from on the federal side. So first of all, still, you know, as affected as everybody is, still make sure you have a really good record keeping system and keep track of all of the expenses that you're incurring right now on the rentals, because without the income, or with the lost income, if you will, your rental loss is now increasing potentially. So that rental loss is still useful and can be used against your other sources of income to the extent of your personal tax situation, but that's certainly a tax benefit at the end of the year. And the other thing too, that the CARES Act did is, if you do have a total loss on your tax return, as last year under 2018 tax law, those losses were limited to only 80% of the loss being used. Now you can use 100% of your operating loss. And if you're a renter and that is your normal operating loss, you can use 100% of that loss against other income. So that's certainly a benefit, to still keep track of all your expenses and so on. The other thing is, if some of the landlords are using this time to maybe do repairs on their property and renovations, and maybe some of the big renovations. Again, in the past, you used to have to capitalize those big repairs and write them off over time. This CARES Act has again allowed landlords to be able to write off a lot of those things in the year the expenses are incurred. So they're encouraging for the property owners to maintain and repair and fix the property and be able to write those things off right away. So that's a big thing. Just the general thing, the deadline for filing tax returns has been extended to July 15th. It's the same deadline for paying taxes, and it's also the same deadline for paying the first quarter estimated payment. So all of the 4/15 deadline has been pushed to 7/15. What has not yet been extended is the second quarter estimated payment, which is due June 15th. So that's kind of funny that they haven't said anything about that. We anticipate that that's also going to get extended. So I would now really worry more about the July 15th filing and paying. The other important thing on the tax side for everybody is, from what I understand now, IRS is accepting fax and electronic signatures. A lot of the things that you file by paper in the past had to have the original signature. Now they accept fax and electronic, just to make it easier for you to sign things and fax. And they're now corresponding by email more, which again, I need to say that it opens up a lot of those phishing schemes where people getting emails from IRS. And in the past we would say, well, IRS doesn't email, they will call you or send you a notice. Well, now I'm not sure. Now it's all up for grabs. The IRS may email you. I still think that their automatic notices are still going timely, but just, if you're trying to file something with IRS and you're worried about, having the original signature, you can certainly do stuff electronically. So those are the couple of things that I wanted to mention that would apply to this group potentially. Maybe Joanne wants to, touch on some of those loans.
Yeah, I can definitely pop into the loans. There are a few different loans, and let me start by saying that they're you are not precluded from, you don't have to choose just one. You can approach this from multiple angles. However, there may be some disadvantages, so you may want to have some specific planning in terms of your approach on which loan you're going to apply for first. All of them have limited amount of funds that have been allocated to them. So everyone feels that pent up, like I gotta be first in line or I won't get any. They all have different benefits, and there's pros and cons to each of the programs that have passed. There is multiple different ways to kind of attack this. So let me first start, I suppose, with the what they call EIDL loans, which are the economic injury disaster loans. You can take a loan that in value up to $2 million. It is a 30-year maturity. For a small business, the interest rate is 3.75%. This does require credit underwriting, collateral, and a personal guarantee. The loan is not forgivable. There is, as a component of this, a one-time $10,000 emergency grant that's available that can be paid at the time you make the application. Some people, this part was available previously. The EIDL fund has been an establishment. It's something that they turn on and off as catastrophes happen. So some folks have already received the $10,000 emergency grant. And if you have, you can still go back and make application for the EIDL loan if you wish. So it's low interest, but it's not no interest. You do this right through the SBA website, so you're not prisoner to any particular bank. You can pay any fixed recurring debt service or payroll with these funds. But the downfall to them is they are not forgivable. So everybody is really excited about kind of the PPP loan, which is the payroll protection loan. More funds were allocated, up to $350 billion of funds were allocated for that. It's any small business, they really don't have a definition of industry or any kind of particular businesses that are eligible. The only ineligible businesses are illegal businesses or those of a lewd and lascivious nature. So you have to pay rent on your strip club. But you're not, but for the normal businesses, there's no really restrictions there. The loan amount that you can obtain is a product of 2.5 times your average monthly payroll for the last 12 months. There is a limit of $100,000 in payroll per employee. So if you have an employee who makes $150,000, you're still allowed to pay them that, but the calculation to obtain your loan caps out at $100,000. That $100,000 is for payroll, bonuses, commissions, anything that is their compensation, direct compensation. Fringe benefits can also be added on top of the $100,000, and that includes retirement plan benefits, group health insurance premiums, paid time off, or retirement benefits. So those types of things go on top of the $100,000 and are included in that calculation. So you take 2.5 times that average monthly payroll, plus if you already took an EIDL loan, that gets added into it, and that calculates your number. It's the lesser of that, or $10 million. That's the maximum loan amount you can obtain. The benefit of the PPP loan is multiple folds. It's a 0.5% interest over 2 years if you have to pay it back. There's no standard credit underwriting, no collateral, no personal guarantee. Your credit score doesn't matter. You do have to demonstrate that you've been impacted by the virus. And the loans are forgivable if you maintain your payroll and wages. So they're looking at a head count. Did you have 15 employees as an average over the last 12 months, or whatever that number was? You've got to maintain that number through June 30th. If you have already had to lay someone off and you bring them back as a result of this loan, you will still be eligible for the full debt forgiveness. You can't reduce a worker's wages by 25% or more without having a sliding scale adjustment to the amount of the debt forgiveness as well. So they're really looking to use this program as a way to keep people working. So the unemployment is really going to the business owner so that the business can stay open, and it's not such a big curve to get back open once things are up and running again. So they're subsidizing the owner to pay the wages to keep the people busy rather than just paying the employee unemployment. Now, when it comes to, you can apply, like I said, for both EIDL and PPP, but you can't apply and use the same expenses. You can't double dip. So you can't say, well, I have to pay rent, or I have to pay a mortgage, or I have to pay payroll in both loan applications. So you can obtain both, but you cannot double dip there. The debt forgiveness piece of the PPP is extremely attractive. It's really designed to keep the next 8 weeks of allowable costs and allow you to maintain your payroll and wages through June 30th. This program is the program that opens tomorrow. The SBA loan application form is available readily on the internet, or we can distribute one. I can get one to you, Andy, that you can provide to the participants. That application, however, needs to be placed with any SBA 7A lender. There are requirements to confirm your identity. So you are going to see a lot less bureaucracy and a lot faster processing if you can go to a bank where you already have existing relationship, because that part will be slowed down. My understanding is there are very few banks prepared to accept your applications tomorrow. Although SBA says they're open tomorrow, they've not even released all of the rules and regulations to the banks yet. So the banks that we've been in contact with are all saying, here's what we think we're going to need. But once you get to the point of submission, you could be asked for more information. So I would urge people, no matter which of the programs you endeavor upon, to continue to keep patients at the forefront. There is a limitation of the funds, which is going to induce panic for folks. But there is talk of expansion of these programs or passage of a fourth stimulus if this is not adequate. It's no secret that the government has made the position that they will literally write a blank check to keep our economy afloat. So the upside is the debt forgiveness in the PPP. The downside is there's a little flexibility in the loan amount that you can obtain.
I think that for the the real estate owners that don't really have payroll, I think for them the economic disaster SBA loan is probably going to be more applicable, even though there's no debt forgiveness. But without having payroll, I think you're leading more into that the SBA loan, which again you can apply online. It may take a little bit longer to get, but that's probably where you're going to get a bigger ability to borrow.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Yeah. What I've been told is, it's very dangerous to live in a world where they say this and they say that when you should be getting your advice from your tax planner. But I've been in a couple of mastermind sessions that I've been had with. It's as business owners, the W-2 aspect of it is applicable to PPP. The 1099 aspect is applicable, but the draws that a business owner would take, and that's typically what say a landlord would be. They'd be taking a draw on the property in all sense and purposes, but that's not covered by the PPP. It's the W-2 and the 1099 that is, but the draws, which I would be as a business owner, that's not being forgiven, or I'll be applying for those. Is that correct?
My understanding is it will be included in what you can borrow. It will not be forgiven. The draws and distributions were specifically limited on the larger loans, on larger business loans, which is a separate program administered through the Secretary of the Treasury. it's beyond, I think, what's applicable to anybody we're working with. But those are where they're really specific. The program contemplates that the small business owner is living off of distributions and draws, not just the W-2 wages.
Right, gotcha. But that wouldn't be forgiven.
Say it again.
But it wouldn't be forgiven. It's not a forgiven.
It wouldn't be forgiven because they're trying to get you to pay other people.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, excellent. Okay. You've mentioned taxes. People have come to me about, or spoken to me, asked me about taxes and how much of this is forgivable. These loans. Can you go over those for Marina?
Yes, from what I understand, it's the expenses for wages, rent, utilities, or if there's no rent, it's the mortgage interest on the place during the 8-week period from the loan origination date. So it's not from today when you apply, it's from when you get the loan, and it's 8 weeks of expenses from that time. There's still no clear guidance on how you apply for that forgiveness. If you call your bank after the 8 weeks is done and you say, okay, can I get this forgiven? I think we're gonna get a little bit more on that from the banks later. But that's how I understand those expenses to be. The big chunk to forgiveness, and I just read this yesterday, is that 75% of those expenses in the 8-week period have to be for payroll. Mm-hmm. W-2. So, they want this loan to really be used to pay people. Yes, other uses include the rent, the utilities, the mortgage interest, but if you want this forgiven, you better be using 75% of that towards payroll. And do not, cut your people during that time. Do not reduce their wage by more than 25%. That's how I understand those forgiveness rules mm-hmm. to work at this point.
Okay. Well, we're coming to the end of the hour and a half. I appreciate. Do you have anything to add in this words of wisdom in the last minute, and then I'll wrap up?
Document. Mm-hmm. There is, if anybody's telling you anything is certain, this is how it is, 100%. Run, because even the lawmakers have said we're not certain how this will unfold. One thing to be cognizant of is implementation challenges and capacity challenges of the government agencies and the banks to provide these relief programs are going to be taxed. Just like you've heard every state complain that unemployment websites have been crashed or are having trouble processing, you're going to find the same thing here. I don't want to say sleep on your rights, but everybody will get help. So try not to be too frenetic about it, and understand that, these rules were just signed last Friday, and now tomorrow they're supposed to be taking the applications. So that's not a lot of time for any real bugs to be worked out. And if you get frustrated by that, it will just exacerbate the situation.
Okay. We're pretty much done, guys, on where we are. I can't thank you enough. Hopefully we can do another one. And perhaps we shouldn't limit to times of crisis. We should do this on from a proactive measure to give advice to all our investors that we have working with us and property owners. But thanks very much. We really appreciate it.
Thank you. Happy to help.
Yeah, we'll do this again soon. Thanks a lot, guys.
Thanks, guys. Bye-bye.
Okay. Bye-bye.